y'all? Welcome back to the Exodus Experience. I am excited to be back with you. Listen, I have, my siblings back, Mario and Kanisa Furlow. So, welcome back, guys. I'm so happy you decided to join us again.
It's good to be here.
I know, right? So it was like
Yes.
a whole bunch of stuff that we like went into, and I'm like, wait, we got to cover that, we got to cover that, we got to cover that. And so that's why I wanted you guys to come back. But we decided that we want to deal with the triggers, when we have couples that are leaving sexual brokenness and joining as one. And so that's what I want us to cover today.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Good.
Okay. So when we had last talked, we had discussed about you guys' testimony, how you came together, all the ins and out of that. And off camera, we started talking about, yeah, there is a thing that we need to discuss about triggers and a partner, or not a partner, a spouse being able to really be patient with the one who has come out of the lifestyle of homosexuality, because there's a transition there. So, can you tell me individually, what was that process like?
Okay. For me, the one coming out of the lifestyle, I would say it was scary at first. One of the things that was a trigger for me was when my wife would touch me on my shoulder if we was lying in bed. I would freeze up because it reminded me of those moments when I was preparing to be molested or for someone to have sexual encounters with me. And so throughout our marriage, I think I had to learn to view sex as something that's sacred and something that's holy. So I had to really reshape my whole mentality around what does sex mean. And so the Lord had me to study that. And so from there, the Lord taught me how to sense and I can smell perversion. And so I can always tell when someone was coming from an impure place or a wrong place. And it also began to help me to be vulnerable in my marriage, to open up to my wife and be able to share some sacred sexual moments and times with her. But that wasn't always easy. I think we went through years of just trying to figure it all out. How do we come together and consummate our marriage and really, really begin to honor that from a pure place. So that was a main trigger for me. I'm sure there were several others as we get into this conversation that we can talk about. But
Yeah. Yeah, that was like a 19-year process for us, because we both had triggers. And so his was from him being molested. Mine was from being sexually abused. I was raped, even though you are in a relationship, when you say no, no means no. So I was in an abusive relationship. And so I dealt with a lot of those types of triggers in our relationship. So he will move a certain way that will remind me how that former person used to move towards me, like he's getting ready to either choke me or he's getting ready to violate me to get his way. Or my husband will, because we had our moments, he would like raise his voice a little bit when he's trying to make his point, or it would remind me how he used to raise his voice towards me. So it would be those type of moments where I would either close down or I would retaliate trying to defend myself, which would cause more friction towards him. And so we're butting heads. And so those trigger would escalate the situation, or it would put us split out separate ways and go in isolation in our own place. And we'll all be dealing with depression in our own way. So we was dealing with that. And that was like a 9 to 10 year process for us.
Okay, so one of the ways that you guys mentioned was the word and being retaught how to think. So your mindset needed to change to realize that you were not each other's violator, correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so relearning how to trust, because that's what it sounds like. You had to trust your spouse in this close, intimate place beyond just the heart. But we're grown folks here, so we're talking about a husband and a wife coming together in a sexual manner, and just just being intimate in one space, because intimacy can vary on so
Yes.
many different levels. And so the word assisted, renewing the mind helped a lot, along with learning trust. What else would you give a couple advice on to help work through whichever one is actually experiencing the triggers? What should be the opposite individual's stance or response? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. That's huge. That's what we a lot. um, I with wives, I always tell them to be mindful where your husband come from, first of all, because we oftentimes women look at men as no matter what their life status been like, they supposed to be strong, they're the headship, and they supposed to function this way no matter what, and they should not be rejecting me. But we have to be mindful at the end of the day, we're human beings, we all have endured something, so we got to be mindful that they need healing, they need respect, they need honor as well as what we do. So when we start putting ourselves in their shoes, then we can start having some compassion. And when you start having compassion, then you can start having that conversation. And when we begin to take the lens away that it's all about me and start focusing it's about us, then we can start sitting down and having that real conversation about what do we need to do to heal as a couple, not what do we need to do to heal as the wife or as the husband, but what do we need to do to heal as a couple, because we're one. And that is something that we had to do, because even though he had triggers, I had triggers. It doesn't matter if he's headship and I'm his neck and I take care of the home and he go work. It didn't matter. We are one. So if he's not right, I'm not going to be right. If I'm not right, he's not going to be right. So what do we need to do to heal? And the first thing we need to do is we have to talk about what we have endured prior to marriage, and then what we need to do to go forward to be healed. So that is a conversation that I always advise wives to really sit down with themselves first, to have that real conversation with themselves first. Because women, we got to pump ourselves up, because we're strong willed, especially if you've been that single woman, always been taking care of yourself. You the one been taking care of the house, and you the one been taking care of the bills. You've been handling stuff. It's hard to be humble and vulnerable when you're the one carrying the weight. And so at some point, you're going to have to release that weight and give it to God and say, you know what? This is not for me to carry. This is not for me to fix, because I have no control over it. And so as wives, we carry so much and we think we supposed to handle everything. And we have to get to the point where we say, God, take this. Give God the heavy load and be vulnerable and know that we can't handle everything. We can't fix everything, because we're not our spouses, mother, sister, any of that. We're their wife. And so because we're their wife, we have to go before God and ask God, how can I be a wife and how can I help our marriage? Not help him, but help our marriage. And that's when God will begin to give the wife strategic things to do, and how to humble yourself, one, and pull back and let go, and also begin to encourage your husband and show him that you care and that you're there for him and support him, so that the walls can begin to come down and that conversation can begin to have, because that's where it starts. Because if you just sit down and say, hey, let's just start having a talk about your triggers, it's not going to happen, because the enemy do not want that conversation to happen, because that's why I believe this what's going on today. Do not want that to
Yeah.
happen, because that's a level of deliverance and freedom. Because when you start testifying about where you've been and how it's had affected you, and you have a partner, your spouse, the person who said for better or for worse, through sickness and health, and said I do, and that's in for the long haul, that is there to help you
Yeah.
through your recovery and through your deliverance, that's your freedom. That is another level of salvation. that is
Now let
that
me
is
ask
a
you
peace
something.
of God. Hmm.
Let let me ask you something, because I want us to rewind for a minute, because you said something very interesting that I don't want to ignore. And you said, don't ask for help for him, you're asking it for the marriage.
Yes, yes,
Can you
because
expound on that?
yes, the marriage is the institution. That's what God ordained. But the enemy is not coming to destroy the individual. He's coming to destroy the marriage, because the enemy tried to destroy us already individual, but he couldn't succeed. And so when you get married, God do not look at you as a couple, as individual. Scripture said
Mhm.
two shall become one. So when God sees you, he sees you as one. So when you going before him, and even you say, God, fix him, God is not going to fix him and fix him. He's going to be like,
Mhm.
take a look at yourself.
Mhm.
And when you
Mhm.
start looking at
Yeah.
yourself, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, well, God work on both of us, because you're gonna find out what's wrong with him. There's a little bit of part of that is inside of you. Because when you get
Now,
married, hmm
yeah. Now
yeah, it's just
let
like when,
me, well, you finish your point, and then, because I want to also mention something. I want to go back, because you gave such a huge bite that I want to break it down, so that all the questions that our viewers may have will be able to say, uh-huh, got that, got that, got that.
go ahead.
Okay. So you you mentioned something about the spouse in this particular situation, you being wife, that we as wives cannot carry the spirit of offense. And that is very important. So don't take it personal if you do tap a trigger from your husband. It's backing up and opening up that container of compassion, if you will, to understand that he's having a moment. Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so Mario, let me ask Mario something. So you recall an instance where you guys can share when that trigger happened and Kanisa had to open up the container of compassion.
An instance. I think
She laughing.
first of all, first of all, I want to say this about the compassion. The compassion piece is so important, especially for those who are coming out of a lifestyle of sexual brokenness or sexual trauma. It is so important because oftentimes we do not receive the compassion that we need in order to heal, in order to move forward in any step in life. We went to the church; they didn't have the compassion. We go to work; they didn't have the compassion. In every area, no one has the compassion. And so, in the confinement of our home, what we call our sanctuary, what we call our sphere of influence, we need those bowels of compassion. And so that compassion opened up so much vulnerability for me. And it didn't happen overnight. So you asked for an instance, and I really can't recall one instance right now, but I do know over a period of time where I was into my depressive state and I did not want to like touch my wife or show her affection, show her intimacy, and all these things. Um, I think she had such a level of compassion for me that when the opportunity presented itself, we were able to talk, and I felt like the walls had come down so that I could be vulnerable and say, "Yes, this is what I'm feeling. This is what it is." Um, I was triggered. I didn't understand what that touch meant. It didn't feel genuine to me. It felt like you just wanted to use my body. So we had to have conversations like that. And then as those conversations began to happen, that wall began to go down. And I was able to heal and then understand the true meaning of intimacy and sex. And on the flip side, whereas my wife seen sex as a tool to um, feed her emotions or her feelings, or it was more like an addiction for her, we began to create other ways to be intimate so that the triggers would not hinder her. You know, I wouldn't be triggered and I wouldn't feed an addiction that need to be broken. So that meant
Wow.
we went through what we call I don't know if you ever heard of the Love Dare. We did that challenge.
Yeah.
We created what we call pillow talk. We created spaces that we could pull out the most vulnerable and intimate parts of ourselves that ultimately led up to a great sexual experience. But it wasn't something that we just went to because we were having a bad day, or I just went to because this is what I'm used to doing when I don't feel loved or rejected. It
Yeah.
truly opened up the power of what I call uh, connection in marriage. It's the power of connection in marriage. And oftentimes, and we tell, and I believe all couples go through this, whether they come from sexual brokenness or not. But I just believe that we have to find that power of connection that will begin to progress your marriage, begin to take your marriage into different streams that you have no idea that would be there. And
Yeah.
so those pillow talks, that love dare, learning each other love language, we're actually doing it again right now because we feel like our love language may have changed a little bit. So we're
Come
doing it
on.
again right now. And it really opens up the power to connect as a couple beyond sex.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so and that's
And that's
that is
important.
major. Yes, especially when someone comes from sexual brokenness. You have to begin to look at marriage beyond sex. Because if someone been raped, if they've been molested, tortured, I even have worked with people who's been tortured, and so you have to think about these things when you going into a marriage. You don't know what level of abuse from mental, physical, or emotion that a person has been through, from addiction, from someone's hands, or from them saying yes to something that they didn't know because immaturity thoughts that put them in a place. And so you have to begin to renew your mind in the original thought that God had designed for you, not what the church say, not what TV say, not what advertisement, and not what another couple say, but you have to go by what God says about you for your marriage. And that's what we always teaching people. What do God say about your marriage? What do God say about sex in your marriage? What do God say about your marriage, to how he wanted it to be healthy? Because for us it is different from other marriage couples. Our standards are very different, and so we are okay with that because we're able to sustain and we're able to have a healthy life. And he had to teach me what healthy sex was, even though he was sexually broken, because I was touched and I was taught what sex was. So he taught me what healthy sex was and how to appreciate it. So that's what I'm saying. You have to understand where a person comes from. But when you start sitting down and explaining your triggers, You begin to understand your spouse in a more intimate way, and you begin to understand why they think the way they think, why they operate to do, why they serve you the way they serve, or why they don't serve you. You begin to understand those things. And so you, because of that, we're able to really be there for each other without audibly saying, I need you there.
So there's like this level of confidence that is built between you as a married couple, and you can learn each other more because you take the time out to actually communicate about what troubles that individual, and you care. And so I'm sure that because you've taken that time, it's allowed for you to grow more intimate with one another and connect one another in all facets that a married couple can come together, meaning mentally, emotionally, spiritually, even in what your desire is as you continue to grow as a married couple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. He is my best friend. Like,
Yeah.
if I cannot share my inner, darkest,
Hmm.
silly, crazy, imaginative thoughts with him,
Hmm.
why are we married?
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
Wow. Wow.
This is who I lay beside every night, who I get up with, who I eat with, who I break bread with. This
Yeah.
is mine. This is all mine. So if he's all
Yeah.
mine, that means he has every part of me, every part of me, just like Christ have every part of me. So if I'm not hiding anything from Christ, I can't hide anything from him. So that is how we live our lives with each other.
And that part for me was scary,
Mm.
because I wasn't used to true intimacy with someone saying, "You have all of me."
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was like,
That was
no.
another compassion too.
Yeah,
That's a compassion for
that
you.
is a
That
yeah.
was a moment for him, because when I told him that, he was like, "Girl, bye." I was like,
But
"You got all of me."
it opened me up to understand um, that my spouse is and should be my best friend, and that I should be able to trust her with the most intimate parts of me. I should be able to say, "I'm struggling today. Can you pray for me?" without any shame or any insecurity as a man. Because as a man, you feel like if I share that level of intimacy with my wife, then I am not walking in the true manhood that I see other men walk in. And so then you start to compare yourself to other
Mhm.
men. And so you can't be comparison. You can't compare yourself to other men. Our marriage is definitely what it's unique. And this is it's unique,
Transform.
uniquely transformed. It's unique, and it's a covenant. And when we understood that it was a covenant, we understood the 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 steps that we had to take to continue to grow our marriage and to progress our marriage. And so one of the number one things I say, don't compare your marriage to anybody else's. Men, don't compare your manhood to what society say manhood is, because most of the time that's false and is incorrect. Really begin to seek the biblical meaning of manhood, seek the biblical meaning of sex, and begin to put practical steps in place to apply those. Number one, I'm not a man who is muscular, played football. I was a man who was in the band. But that doesn't change the fact that God has given me the responsibility to provide as a husband and to be a husband to my wife and a father to my family.
That's right.
And so
Mhm.
that has become um, my freedom.
Mhm.
It became my freedom because I didn't look at myself now as this little boy who was not worthy enough to be a father or a husband. Now I see myself first as a son of God. And now I'm capable enough to be a man of God, to walk into husbandry and to fatherhood.
And I also want to add, we're not
Absolutely.
perfect. We're not perfect. Want to put that out there. Our marriage is not perfect. We do have our struggles. We do deal with temptations. We do like everybody else, but it's how we see it and how we stand in our marriage and how we view it. That's what makes us different and stand on it. So I just want to put that out there. And so I just, because sometimes people think our marriage is perfect. I'm like, to God be the glory on your end, but trust me and believe, we do have some issues, but it's how you choose to work through it. Marriage is a
I
job.
think that's it. That's it right there. Is how do you choose to work through it? And
Mm-hmm.
how do you work through it together and no one becomes offended when that
Mm-hmm.
spouse is having a moment, okay? it, because when you start getting offended, then would you agree or disagree that that in itself could be or become a trigger where they would feel as if they're not being considered?
Absolutely. And I think even when that offense comes in, it begins to rehash other things like rejection and abandonment. Because I think one of the key factors is when I was not able to perform sex with my wife because of mental or whatever things were going on within me, it made her feel like I was rejecting her.
Mhm.
And so that was key to understand that when I said I don't have it right now, how do I say it, and what do I do to make her feel loved outside of what I can perform in sex? So that is key. That is key. So whatever it is, I don't want her to feel rejected, and she don't want me to be offended because she feels rejected.
Mm, wow.
Yeah.
So you are constantly reminding each other, I love you and I'm
Unconditionally.
here for
I
you.
can.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my thought was, as especially as believers in kingdom, how we flow and operate in ministry. Um,
Yeah.
when someone comes to us, we want to make sure that they can feel the love of Christ and we can meet their needs. And oftentimes we don't practice that same thing within our own homes. If I don't
Mhm.
treat my wife like a child of God that I am also called to minister to, then I miss the whole point of us being together in marriage. And so I have to have the same compassion for her, if not more, than I have with the people that I'm called to be their pastor or their covering or their mentor, etc.
Exactly.
That's good. Now, let me ask you this question cuz I want to make sure that we cover this as we're wrapping this up. With a couple that are dating, how would you suggest that they handle each other in getting prepared to have to enter into this zone of intimacy?
Therapy
That was a good question,
101.
huh? Because you smiling, Kanisa.
Therapy 101. If you are dating and you know the person that you are dating is an overcomer of sexual trauma, any type of sexual trauma, or you're dealing with any type of trauma yourself, and you're thinking to move forward in engagement and marriage, and you know this is the one, this is my boo, we're gonna get married and all that, I advise you to begin to seek out therapy. And if you are in therapy, talk with your therapist to where it is time for you to bring that person in some of the sessions, not all of your sessions, but some of your sessions, to help you to start having those real conversations. Because what you do not want to do is go to the altar and say, I do, thinking everything's going to be the same as you were as you're dating. Because soon as you say, I do, each one of you begin to change. So what was lovely and cute when you was dating could begin to irritate you and get on your nerves when you get married because you haven't been properly prepared, because two shall become one. So that's what I will always advise anyone that is dating that has some type of trauma lifestyle, a trauma past per se. If there is no trauma, there still needs to be wise counsel in the, preparing for marriage, because there's a level of communication that needs to take place. And once you have that wise counsel, this is when the man and the woman needs to sit down. I advise over dinner, after you have a good dinner, because everything is wonderful after you have a good dinner. You get that dessert and the coffee or your wine, whatever you prefer. Sit down and start strategizing what your expectation for one another. What is your expectation for me? What is your expectation is? What does marriage look like for you? You need to talk about those things, and what are we going to produce out of our marriage? Because people think marriage is all about sex and children, when actually marriage is all about giving glory to God. Our marriage do not belong to us. It belongs to God. So whatever God wants for the marriage, we have to surrender it to him. So you have to sit down and have those conversations and begin to deal with your past, deal with your inner thoughts about the situation. And that's going to be, because we all have those questionable moments. Should I not get married? You kind of get on my nerves, and you might want to talk about those things, but start having those real conversations while you're dating and getting engaged. So when you get married, it's no problem. You can be like, babe, this is how I'm feeling right now. And no one is offended because you have trained yourself. You have conditioned your mind and your heart to receive your spouse while you're dating and while you're engaged. So that will always be, and always pray. Pray individual before the Lord and pray together.
Okay.
I would say, one, look at the same triggers you have in your relationship with God.
Mhm.
That's good. Come on here, Pastor.
Mhm. That is
Because
good.
some of those same triggers are going to happen in your relationship with your spouse, because the marriage is
Love God
comparable
so
to how
much.
Christ loves the church. And so I had triggers even as a single person where God would talk to me or speak to me or touch me, and because he's trying to love me, it reminded me of something that was totally not the case. And so I end up walking in disobedience. So really identify your personal triggers as it relates to the Lord, and as it relate to any practical thing in your life. If you have a trigger with your mom yelling at you, identify that. If you have a trigger with your father not being in your life, identify that, and um, do it with conviction and not condemnation. Because a lot of times we are afraid to talk about those triggers because it make us feel so unworthy and less than. But God is not in the condemning business. He wants you to be really whole. He wants to grow you.
Reconcile.
So really identify those triggers, write them down, and when you identify those triggers, think about, what can I do to help myself in my singleness to deal with those triggers, and how do I share that with my spouse or my soon-to-be spouse, um, in that perspective.
That's so good. Okay, so again, tell us how someone can get in touch with
Okay, you can reach both of us. We are the Unique Transformation Enterprise. We are on Facebook and Instagram, and our website is uniquetransformationenterprise.org. We are also leaders and presidents of the Overcomers Network. That is a group, a fellowship of believers who have come out of the lifestyle of sexual brokenness. And we come together to share fellowship, community building, and engagement, and to also equip them to just go out and be who God has called them to be beyond their sexual trauma. And so that website is overcomersnetworkglobal.org. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram.
Hope you guys enjoyed this program today. We want to encourage you that if you are a couple that is seeking help, reach out to the Furloughs. There was a wealth of information that they poured out today. Know that you are not alone. We want you, we want your spouse and your marriage to be successful and enjoyed for years and years to come. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.